like to welcome you here to the Palestine Museum US, and I was hoping that we would welcome you on a better occasion. However, things are what they are, and today we are getting together to celebrate the life of Shireen Akleh, and also to talk a little bit about the circumstances of her death and to talk a little bit about her. I'm going to start the session with some remarks. Then this will be followed with a more formal statement or eulogy read by a more competent speaker than I am. I was going to thank people who joined us on Zoom, but we can thank people who joined us on Facebook. We are on Facebook. And once I get off the podium, I'm going to try to figure out of sending an email to the 350 people telling them to go to Facebook, if that helps. To begin with, I wanted to share a few presentations here, a presentation of like 2 or 3 slides. Certainly, the things that are happened and things that Israel has done and has been doing, there are no words for this. There are no words for the acts that they've committed. We could search the English language and we would not find any words that can describe what they did and how they did it. I should point out, and I'd like to thank some of the organizations who supported us here in this event, Palestine Rights, the Tree of Life Educational Fund, Jewish Voice for Peace, American Muslims for Palestine, Mending Minyan, the Peace Council of Greater New Haven, Middle East Crisis Committee, and The Struggle. We're also thankful to the Ben & Jerry Company for providing ice cream for our event here. As you know, Ben & Jerry had closed down their operations in the illegal settlements in Palestine, and we thank them and appreciate that effort and their position on those matters, and we wish other U.S. companies would do the same. I'd like to share with you a video that was on social media, and I hope everybody can see that. We're having a problem with Zoom. We can't allow people in for some reason. Please follow us on Facebook. Hello? This is the scene from Shireen's funeral. As you could see, there are about 15 or 20 people holding the coffin and carrying it, and the Israeli police attacked them because they noticed that they were holding Palestinian flags, and the Palestinian flags are banned in Jerusalem. And as you can see, these policemen, there's a person on the ground here, totally not in a position to confront anybody, and they continue to beat him up with sticks. This person has one arm free and is using it to fend off the beatings by the policemen. And the other people, some of them have fell down. At some point, the people in the front collapsed, and the casket almost fell to the ground, until other people jumped underneath it and propped it up. I don't think anybody in the world can explain why any police department or why anybody would want to do anything like this. I mean, it is totally, totally unexplainable, and there aren't any words that can explain how could anybody do this. And we're not just marking the killing of Shireen today. Israel kills Palestinians on a daily basis. You know, there's hardly any day that passes that they don't kill 1, 2, or 3 people, depending on, you know, how convenient that day was for them. About 10 days after Shireen was killed, this journalist also, perhaps she was not as famous, as well known as Shireen was also killed by the Israeli military. She had gotten a new job as a reporter, and this was her 3rd day on the job. And you could see her body on the ground here, and there are 2 soldiers standing, waiting for her to die before they let the ambulance come and pick her up. It is as common for Israelis to kill Palestinians and not allow ambulances to come to provide any first aid to them. So that's another feature of what Israel does, and that's one of those things that words don't exist for describing it. Now, this is the funeral of Ghofran. Her name is Ghofran Warasne. And this is, if you thought Shireen's funeral was chaotic, wait till you see this. Okay, so that's what happens there on a daily basis. That's not all what Israel does in the occupied areas. Israel fights the Palestinians on 1,000 fronts on a day-to-day basis. And just some of the things that they do include home demolitions. People who build homes because they have no place to live, and Israel doesn't give permits for building homes. Israel goes in and demolish the homes, saying that they were built without permits. They're built on Palestinian lands, and people building them on their own lands. Confiscation of land for turning them into settlements. Expulsions of people, physically removing them from their property and moving them somewhere else. unjustified killing. Soldiers are, their rules of engagements allow them to shoot somebody if they feel uncomfortable. Just think how low that bar is. So many people get killed for no reason, simply because a soldier thought somebody jumped, or maybe a person was mentally unstable, or a person had some psychological problem, and when they saw a soldier, they were frightened. They get killed right on the spot. So we see that happening day in and day out, and it happens with total impunity. The soldiers face no consequences. The people that gave them the orders and permitted them to do that face no consequences either. The children are being arrested and put in prison as young as 5 and 8 and 10 years old. The penalty for throwing a stone could be as high as 20 years in prison. If a child throws a stone at an Israeli soldier, they could be sentenced to 20 years in prison according to the regulations and the laws. And that's not the maximum penalty. The maximum penalty is they can be killed on the spot at the drop of a hat. That is the maximum penalty, which is often what we see. And then you have settlers' violence. Settlers are the people who are living in illegal settlements. They're not subject to any law, and they're all armed, and they go around terrorizing people. They cut down trees and burn crops, and they let their dogs loose on cattle and sheep, and the sheep get killed by the dogs. It's not just the people that suffer from that. And there are so many other things. We could be here for days just reciting the different ways in which Israel breaks international law and humiliates people and kill them, and all for the purpose of wanting them to get out of there. They want all the Palestinians to get out of Palestine so they can have a pure nation made of all Jewish people and nobody else. And that's what people call as apartheid. And South Africa tried that for years and years, and they knew it wasn't, at the end it did not work. And it's not going to work in Palestine either. It's just a matter of time before the world wakes up to what Israel has been doing. The point I really want to make here is Israel is not the only one guilty of what it's doing. It's the people that support Israel. Anybody that donates any money to Israel, they're paying for what you saw here. They're paying for all the killings, they're paying for all the violations, they're paying for all the inhuman acts that are being done. Even if you donate $1 to Israel, you're contributing $1 towards the crimes against humanity that you saw. So let all the people know who are around here in Connecticut and in the US and everywhere else who donate money to Israel, let it be known that they are guilty as Israel is, because they are complicit in the crime. If you assist and aid and abet somebody in the crime, you're just as guilty as they are. And someday there will be an international criminal court that's going to prosecute all these people. The United States is a big supporter of Israel, the United States government, and many people in Congress. They also bear the responsibility because they are enabling, they're providing the weapons, they're providing the money, the $3.5 billion that gets sent to Israel every year from taxpayers' money, all to fund these crimes and the killings and the destruction of life. And the U.S. is willing to trash its own principles in favor of Israel. This country was built on liberty and justice for all. And obviously justice is being administered for some and not others. And the liberty is being limited and abridged based on the political opposition of the United States and the relations with Israel. So, I think we made the point clear here. At this point, I would like to invite Justine McCabe to come and provide the formal eulogy for Shireen Abu Akleh. Justine?
Nice to see you all here on this sad occasion. I'd like to start with some words that may address what Faisal was saying. They're the words of philosopher Judith Butler, her book Frames of War. And she says, one way of posing the question of who we are in these times of war is by asking whose lives are considered valuable, whose lives are mourned, and whose lives are considered ungrievable. We might think of war as dividing populations into those who are grievable and those who are not. An ungrievable life is one that cannot be mourned because it has never lived. That is, it has never counted as a life at all. We can see the division of the globe into grievable and ungrievable lives from the perspective of those who wage war in order to defend the lives of certain communities and to defend them against the lives of others, even if it means taking those latter lives. Unquote. So contrary to how Israel treats Palestinians as non-lives, as ungrievable, we insist today that Palestinians are a grievable people and that the loss of Shireen Abu Akleh is clearly grievable. We gather to remember Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh as she was wearing a prominently marked press jacket and helmet when she was shot dead by an Israeli sniper on May 11th in Jenin in occupied Palestine. She was 51 years old. We're here to grieve her death, but also celebrate her life. Shireen reported for Al Jazeera for 25 years. She was widely respected internationally and beloved across the Arab world, especially. In Arabic, Shireen means sweet, gentle. From all we know, she was sweet, kind, and funny. She was also a great role model for other women, especially Arab women. Shireen was both Palestinian and American. She was a Christian among her largely Muslim fellow Palestinians. With this heritage, she embodied the multiculturalism that has always characterized Palestine, despite Israeli attempts to make something Palestine is not and has never been exclusively Jewish. Above all, Shireen was dedicated to reporting these truths: the truth of the brutality of Israel's illegal military occupation of 55 years, the truth of the Palestinian Nakba, the catastrophe, when the majority native Christian and Muslim Palestinians were ethnically cleansed by the first Israelis from 1947 to 49. The truth that in defiance of international law and a condition for Israel's admission to the United Nations, Israel refuses to allow millions of Palestinian refugees to return to their home and land in Palestine. And finally, the truth of Israeli apartheid over all historic Palestine, as documented by several human rights bodies, including Israel's Beit Tselem, Human Rights Watch, and Amnesty International. Shireen's witness challenges us, her fellow Americans, to also speak the truth about our government's complicity in the terrorism and injustice of Israeli occupation and apartheid. We give Israel more than $3.8 billion of our hard-earned tax dollars annually. We protect Israel from any condemnation at the UN Security Council for its human rights violations. Israel buys our weapons, including sniper rifles, with much of that aid, and then tests them out, as in this case. As I think about Shireen's murder, it's hard not to think about the enormous support we're giving to Ukrainians for resisting Russian aggression. Why not the same for Palestinians who are resisting dispossession, mostly peacefully and mostly by just staying on their land? Shireen constantly shone a light on the reality of the U.S.-Israeli special relationship, that we share the same national formative acts of ethnic cleansing and settler colonialism. And significantly, Israel and the United States share a denial of these histories. Thus, like Palestine itself, Shireen was a casualty of settler colonialism. To bring this issue even closer to home today, as we also celebrate Juneteenth, when chattel slavery was ended in America, consider how Israeli soldiers killing unarmed Palestinians is no different from American policemen killing unarmed African Americans, Palestinians because they're not Jews, and blacks because they're not white. Ultimately, Shireen's murder as a journalist challenges us to stand up for freedom of the press everywhere. Her life challenges me not to look the other way. May Shireen Abu Akleh rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. At this point, we will unveil the memorial portrait that was painted by Jacqueline Bijan. Shireen is going to be next to Razan Najjar, who was a volunteer paramedic in Gaza, who was assisting some wounded people near the border with Israel when she was targeted by an Israeli sniper and killed. This happened a few years ago. The color off.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Palestine and what it's like to be a Jewish man visiting in Palestine. And I'll reference a few people that I met and the welcomes that I received. And the first one is a 14-year-old man, 14-year-old boy named Ahmed Dawabsha in Duma. I and my wife Susan and our friends Ellen and Mark were cycling through the West Bank. We stopped in Ahmed's house for lunch, and Ahmed played the oud for us. His family gave us lunch, and they were just so welcoming. He recited poetry. In 2018, we visited in Nakab and met Khalil, David, help me with the last name? Khalil Al-Amour, once again, completely welcoming all of us, me as a Jewish man and the rest of our group, to his home and in the Nakab. And the other one I'll mention is the greetings that we got from hundreds of people as we cycled through the West Bank, independent of who we are, just so happy to see us. And the last one I'll mention is the artist Malak Matar, who I never did see in Palestine, but whose work has been exhibited in the Palestine Museum, who visited New Haven 2 times, and once again was so warm in being with our community, being with me as a Jewish person, staying in our home. And so that's the Palestine that I know, that's the Palestine that I think of, and I really hope that, and thank you, Faisal, for the Palestine Museum and showing us what Palestine is really about. And I just hope that in my lifetime, I'll see the flourishing of Palestine without the oppression. So thank you very much.